Welcome to this Facebook Live that we're going to do today, that we're going to talk about 4 keys to growing in self-awareness. You know, self-awareness is something coaching clients usually don't state as their main objective. People don't usually call me and say, you know what, I want to grow in self-awareness. However, self-awareness is a very important trait that we develop, and it's a process that we continue to grow in. So, what am I talking about when I say we want to grow in self-awareness? What does self-awareness mean? Well, those who are self-aware have an accurate perception of who they are. They know themselves. Now, we all have blind spots, which we'll talk about in a minute, but the higher we score in self-awareness, the more accurate we know ourselves. What are your strengths? What are your gifts? What brings you energy? What takes energy? What are the emotions that you're feeling in any particular moment? What do you value? What's most important to you that influences the decisions you make? As you can see, there's lots of different areas to self-awareness. So today we're going to talk about them and what are the ways that you can grow in what's a crucial area. Well, this one story I've sort of never forgotten. This was years ago, but I was standing in line at a grocery store, and the 2 women in front of me knew each other, and they were talking about a friend of theirs, a mutual friend. And they said, you know, it's really sad that she doesn't really see herself accurately. She's such a lovely, genuine, caring person. I'd really wish she'd see herself as we see her. And so the first thing is we're going to talk about in growing in self-awareness, get honest feedback from people who you know and who like you. How do they see your strengths? What do they see as your gifts? I had one coaching client about a year ago. She not only did not know what her strengths and giftings were, but she felt that to even look at that, to consider what they might be, was sinful. That she thought if you were really humble, you didn't look at what you were good at. Well, the problem with that mindset is we want to know what our gifts and our strengths are so we can be more aware of reaching out and serving others with those very things that we're good at, that God gave us, the talents. So I suggested that she name 3 people that had a good idea of who she was and what she was good at. And she named her sister, a co-worker, and a close friend. And then, and this was very uncomfortable for her, I suggested that she ask them individually, what did they see as her giftings? This was hard for her, very uncomfortable, but she finally worked up the courage. And the results were amazing because each of these people basically gave the same words. They said she was wise, she was very caring, and she had a great sense of humor. She was encouraging. One person said, you know, I just like to connect with you when I'm feeling down on myself because you always lift me up and you give me such biblical wisdom, and I really appreciate that. So for her, that simple exercise helped her to become more self-aware. Another client did the same exercise, and she heard over and over how she was such a great listener, that she was very caring of others. So here's what I'd like to challenge you. If you're not clear on your gifts, your strengths, what you do well, consider this exercise. Who knows you and likes you, and you trust their answers, and ask them, what do they see in your capabilities, your assets, your talents? So the next area that's crucial to developing self-awareness is consider completing some online assessments like personality assessment or an emotional intelligence assessment or strength finders. I have on my website at georgiashaffer.com/store some of the key assessments I use. But what's really helpful of that is understanding, because usually they're self-report. So what you're going to report or how you're going to answer is something you've put in. But especially in the area of personalities, a lot of us either A, don't understand clearly what our personality is, or B, we have personality envy. We don't like who we are. We want to be a different personality. So we not only don't recognize it, we don't embrace it, and we want to be somebody that God didn't create us to be. So if God created you to be this low-key, easygoing, laid back type of personality, embrace that. That's a wonderful trait. If you're more outgoing and like to reach out to others, know no strangers, again, embrace who you are. So I find in coaching many times I can say what I see is somebody's strength, but taking one of these assessments helps reinforce it or believe what they really are good at. Because sometimes they think, well, a coach is a cheerleader. Well, a really good coach is encouraging, but they don't give you false information. They don't just go rah, rah. They give you honest feedback, which is really important. But just to give you a story I often share about assessments is, one of my clients, she was in a relationship. She thought it was going to end up in engagement. They'll get married. But when things broke apart, so did her confidence and her understanding of herself. Plus, in her work environment, people had been giving her feedback, those under her. She was in a management position. They kept letting her know that they felt she was opinionated and she didn't always understand their perception of a problem or an issue. And so I suggested she take one of the emotional intelligence assessments, which she did. And by the way, if you hear that noise, the person who mows my lawn suddenly arrived. So sorry about that. The weather's been rainy, then clear, so I couldn't dictate when he comes. But anyhow, going back to this particular client, Allison, she took the assessment, and it was so neat because it reported back to her that her area, lowest emotional intelligence, was in her ability to manage her relationships. That she didn't always listen to people, that they did not feel heard, and that they saw her as opinionated. So for Allison, taking that assessment helped her tremendously grow in self-awareness and be more, focused on how she could, improve her relationship in this particular area. So far we said, ask the people who know and like you to give honest feedback on your capabilities, your talents, your assets. Then we talked about completing some of these personality, emotional intelligence, or strength finder assets. And then the third key in growing in self-awareness is understand you have relational blind spots. We're not always aware of these. When you've been taught to drive, assuming you drive a car, we're taught you have visual blind spots, that there was an area to your left where something as large as a car could disappear. And you were also taught how to compensate for that. You could get a blind spot mirror, or you could look to the left when you wanted to get in the passing lane. Well, we also have relational blind spots. So growing in self-awareness is understanding that we do have these relational blind spots and what some of the more common ones are. So let me give you an example. By the way, I wrote a whole book on this, Avoiding the 12 Relationship Mistakes Women Make. But just to give you an idea, one of them is we're really good at justifying our poor choices. Oh, we're not really bad. People make that mistake too. So we can justify what's obviously a poor decision that we made. Or we discount the cost of negative relationships. We're aware that some people just are life draining, but we discount how much those relationships cost us in time, cost us in emotional and mental resources. There's a high price we pay for those. And I really became aware of this during my treatments for cancer because I didn't have a whole lot of energy. I was tired a lot of times. And so when I would interact with these negative, life-draining people, it cost me big time. But when we're feeling good, we don't always understand how costly these particular relationships are. So that's a blind spot that we got to be aware of the price we pay in time, mental and emotional resources to spend a lot of time with these people in our lives. Another blind spot is we discount, we minimize how costly and how much energy our emotions take. People who do commercials, they understand it. They're usually tugging at an emotional heartstring, like in movies, we're up, we're down. But we can't minimize the impact of our emotions because in the brain, it first processes things emotionally. So it first impacts us before it goes to the rational part of our brain. So don't minimize your emotions. Don't minimize the impact of them because in many ways they speak louder in our brains than our rational thoughts at times. And then another blind spot is just not understanding, we were talking about strengths earlier, that one of your strengths, let's say you're very outgoing, can meet a stranger and make them feel very comfortable. But that very strength of being outgoing, being able to hold a conversation, when it's carried to an extreme, you might take up too much emotional talk space. You're talking all the time. You're not giving space for others to share what they're thinking or feeling. So your strength of being very outgoing and talkative carried to an extreme doesn't give other people a chance to share their feelings. Then the fourth key to be growing in self-awareness is seek the wisdom of God. Because as we've already said, we can't see everything. We don't always understand, what our strengths and our capabilities are. So we need to be willing to seek through the Holy Spirit, what is God showing us about our level of self-awareness? And here's some key verses that we don't want to lose sight of. In Jeremiah 17:9, he says, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? So Jeremiah is saying, our heart's deceitful. We don't always see ourselves as we are. And I like to pray this verse from Psalm 139:23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See, God, through the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, can reveal what is really in our hearts and minds that we might not be aware of. So I often pray that, and I'll write in my journal. That's another way I become more self-aware. When I write down and look back on what I think God's telling me. But don't be anxious and think, oh, I'll never figure out, who I really am. I'll never really know myself. Because in Psalm 32:8, God says, I'll instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I'll show you. I'll counsel you. I'll watch over you. I'll help you see yourself clearly. And that's so important. Here's an example of seeking God's wisdom with another coaching client I once had. She lost a valuable coaching client contract. It would have brought in lots of money, $250,000. And she lost it. And on reflection, and as she prayed about it, she realized she had become too focused on the income, which is not what she really valued. She valued caring about her clients and serving them. But in this particular instance, God revealed to her she had become too focused on the income. She was too shattered, too upset when she lost it. And then she did what many of us do. We can either push that truth aside and totally discount it and ignore it, or we can see the harsh reality of who we are. And when we do, it's downright painful at times to see ourselves as we are. And in this case, when she saw how selfish and money had become far too important, she started to beat herself up. And she got stuck in shame and guilt. And by the way, tomorrow's Facebook Live, I'm going to talk about that relationship between shame and guilt and how we can get caught there. How she just kept hearing the voice of the evil one who said, look at you. God can never use you. Look how money hungry you are. But then as she prayed, she became out of it. And in our coaching, we talked about going boldly to God's throne of grace, asking that he forgives us. And he says, I will forgive you. And just admitting, here's who she was. It was an opportunity to see herself in a way she hadn't seen before, and an opportunity for real growth, which is where she landed. And so for her, this was a very growing opportunity. So if I'd sum it up, these keys to growing in self-awareness that I really want you to remember, because again, self-awareness is crucial. It affects all your relationships. It affects you at work or at home. So we need to grow in this area. Self-awareness is a process. It's not like, oh, suddenly I know who I am. It's something we continue to grow and mature in. But the 4 keys I shared is, first, seek honest feedback on your strengths. Don't lose sight of those, your talents, your capabilities. Ask the people who like and you've learned to trust. What do they see as your gifts? Then number 2, be willing. Maybe you want to fill out some of those online assessments. Emotional intelligence, personality. They'll help you gain a greater picture of your natural strengths and weaknesses. Then the third thing is realize you have relational blind spots. And so what are some of those? I love the quote. I think it was by Carol Travis and Aaron Elliot Anderson, I think was the name. The quote was, we're as unaware about who we really are as fish are unaware they're swimming in water. So that's a good analogy of saying about our blind spots, that we got to be aware that we have them. And what are they? And then the 4th key, and the most crucial key as Christians, is seek God's wisdom. What does he see in our hearts and minds that we might not be seeing, but give us an opportunity to grow and become more powerful for his kingdom? Now, as I wrap up, I want to remind those of you who are dealing with separation or divorce, there's 2 more days to sign up for Rebuild After Divorce. And growing in self-awareness is one of the key skills that we focus on. You will not start out Rebuild After Divorce and end up in 3 months from now without becoming more self-aware, because you'll see how others grow in your group. It's a small group of Christian women who are also separated and divorced and who want to grow towards their changed future. It's an encouraging group. We give you the skills and the talents. We have 5 sessions where we give you teaching strategies, and then we have 4 sessions where we help you implement what you're learning. So if that's something you're interested in, go to georgiashaffer.com, and Shaffer is spelled SHAFFER, .com/rebuild-open. And it'll give you the dates, the details, the cost. But whether you're divorced, you're separated, you're married, or you've never been married, self-awareness is a skill I want to, encourage you to continue to develop. Because as I said, it affects every part of your life. So thanks for joining. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about on my Facebook Live about guilt and shame, which we sort of touched on today, how when we do see ourselves as we are, we can get stuck in those feelings. So take care, have an awesome day, and God bless you mightily.